This is the Conservative American Message, hosted by the one and only Cam Lau. It is Monday, May 13th, 2024, and you are listening to the 72nd episode of this podcast. Elbert Hubbard said, "An ounce of loyalty is worth a pound of cleverness." If you support what we're doing here at the Conservative American Message, please show your support by making a purchase in our merch store. Go to campodcast.square.site or just click the link in the description of this episode. If you want to support the podcast for free, give us a 5-star rating and follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. To stay up to date on everything we've got going on here, follow us on social media at the Conservative American Message on Instagram and Facebook. The Republican National Convention isn't until the middle of July, but I think we can all safely assume that Donald Trump will be the nominee. What we're not so certain of is who he will pick for vice president. There are so many options to choose from. Some are really good, and some are pretty bad. Media speculation will lead us to believe that the top contenders include names like Tim Scott, J.D. Vance, Kristi Noem, Doug Burgum, Tulsi Gabbard, and Vivek Ramaswamy. As rumors are running rampant about President Trump's shortlist for VP, I'm certain that at least some of these names are on it. Obviously, Trump has made clear that Mike Pence is not considered for his old job. Starting with the least likely of them all, I have strong doubts that Donald Trump will pick Doug Burgum to be his vice president. Doug is a classic bought and paid for phony politician. He was wise to ally himself with Trump after exiting the primary, and that move might even earn him some role within the administration, but I'm fairly certain he's not going to win the top spot. It's fascinating to me that Tulsi Gabbard has made this list, at least to the media, as she is a former Democrat and a Hindu. Although she has been a huge activist against the corruption in D.C. and has been outspoken about the insane leftist views of the Democrats that they've adopted, she's still far to the left of even the most rhino congressmen. I have great respect for her and everything she's doing, don't get me wrong, but I don't see how selecting her for any role in Trump's administration would benefit him politically or be any asset to his team, really. Kristi Noem has a legit chance at VP, and even more likely could find a place in the administration, but she has been caught in the trap of being bought by corporations before in South Dakota, especially in regards to this carbon capture pipeline. She's also come under fire recently over her new book. In the book, she recounts the time that she had to shoot her dog after it killed the neighbor's chickens, and in the same day decided to kill a goat that had been a nuisance to her family. Conservatives and liberals alike were outraged by this, which kind of surprised me. It's an obvious violation to PETA and crazy leftists, but the fact that conservatives are cutting ties with her over simply having to put her dog down the old-fashioned way is very out of character, I think. Hasn't anyone read Old Yeller before? Sometimes you just gotta do what needs to be done. Anyway, Kristi Noem had originally been polling as the top contender for Trump's number 2 spot. It now appears that she's become far too radioactive. Of course, in politics, much can change in even a matter of weeks, and by the time Trump makes this a selection, the book will probably have blown over for Kristi. J.D. Vance is a young senator from Ohio who has been gradually rising in the Republican ranks and has been becoming nationally known for his outspokenness and loyalty to Trump. Being among the most loyal Trump supporters in the Senate has brought him into the VP conversation. He's not been in Congress very long and has very little experience, but he would be a good choice for Trump if he's looking at the future of the Republican Party and who could possibly succeed him as our leader. J.D. Vance is certainly a person who could do that. He's a good balance because he's not as wild as, say, Vivek Ramaswamy, but he's not a rhino either. Speaking of Vivek Ramaswamy, in my opinion, he's the most likely Trump pick. He's been fully behind Trump since back when he was even running his own presidential campaign. He was one of the first to drop out and get behind him, and he vowed to pardon Trump if he were elected. Vivek has been at Trump's side on the campaign trail everywhere, and further, he's a political outsider just like Trump. I think he would make an excellent pick, but I'm slightly concerned about his lack of experience in politics. I love a good political outsider, but bringing Vivek on this ticket will not win any political favors for Trump. Vivek is extremely intelligent and has great vision for this country, but without the know-how to get things done in the messy bureaucratic system that is DC, or honestly just the political relationships it takes, I don't know if he would be the best running mate in that regard. I am 100% convinced that Vivek will be working for Trump in some capacity in his new administration. While I think he's still most likely the candidate that Trump would select, my favorite pick is actually Tim Scott. He embodies the perfect balance between establishment Republican and yet legitimate conservative. He's the kind of guy that I don't think could be trusted to run this country on his own, but working for Trump, he could be absolutely wonderful. Being black also doesn't hurt his chances in the least. But I actually like Tim Scott generally, and he'd be a good balance to Trump. One-on-one, I would always choose Vivek over Tim, but putting Vivek and Trump together is just a little bit too volatile for my taste. Tim Scott was the very first primary challenger to drop out and get behind Trump, even before the Iowa caucus, so I would hope that he'd be rewarded for that loyalty. With the exception of Doug Burgum or Tulsi Gabbard, I would be okay with any of these other potential contenders. Keep in mind though, Donald Trump is not easily predictable, and he could have all sorts of other people in mind aside from this list that we would never think of. I wish I could say that I trust Trump enough that he can make a good pick no matter what, but the man does worry me sometimes. I don't think he chose poorly the first time with Mike Pence. Pence just couldn't cut it when the establishment came after them as hard as they did and decided to rig the election. He was weak under that level of pressure, but up until that point, I think Mike was pretty awesome. Once again, he was the balance that a figure like Trump needs. Somebody who is establishment, but not rhino. Modern-day Pence is certainly a rhino, but he wasn't always that way. What I'm absolutely certain of is that whoever Trump picks will have long-lasting effect on the Republican Party's future. I mean, any one of these people could be our future leader of this party. That would be our candidate in 2028. Trump is great, but he can only get 2 terms, despite what all the crazy conspiracy theory people are saying. We as a party need to look to the future and find non-rhino candidates who can actually do something. There are a lot of them in Congress, but some of them are just not all that popular yet. They haven't come on the national stage, but we should all be keeping an eye out. There are still true conservatives in this country, and believe it or not, there are still true conservatives in politics. Well, that's all I have time for. Were you offended by this podcast? Good. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate all of you. Have a great week, and stay conservative.